Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another astrology video. This week, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming Venus retrograde cycle, and hopefully give you a little bit of food for thought in how to think about this cycle as a more macro perspective. And in my next video, I will take Venus retrograde through the houses so you can get a better understanding of what might be the key influence for you. In this video, I just want to talk about the cycle and get a bit of an overarching theme as to what Venus retrograde is all about. Before I dive right into there, if you're new to this channel, thank you, and do consider subscribing. And if you've been here before, welcome back. It's great to have you. In March, on March 12, I'll be launching my new contemporary astrology program, and the enrollment for that is currently open. So if you're looking to learn astrology, welcome. I'd love to have you on board. This is going to be year one, where we go through all the basics, in depth, of course, of chart reading. Now, one question I do get often is, do I need to start at the beginning if maybe I've done another course with somebody else, or I'm self-taught, in terms of, knowing some of those fundamentals in astrology? Now, there's two things about that. Firstly, you don't know what you don't know. I've been practicing astrology for over 20 years now. And so usually what happens when students come into my program thinking they didn't need to do it again, they learn so much more. And when it comes to reading charts for clients, reading charts for friends, family, you can never learn too much of the basics, the fundamental underpinning principles of astrology. There's all the fancy technical and fandangle things that we like to play with as astrologers. But if you can get a really, really solid grasp of explaining the basics in a multitude of different ways, that is what is going to make you a good astrologer, not only understanding the mechanics of it, but also the language of it and communicating it. And I think that is the gift of my midheaven being Pisces, ruled by Jupiter in Gemini on my ascendant. One of the gifts I do have as an astrologer is blending the technical, the philosophical, and the spiritual as well. I'll put a link to the course website where you can find out more information, enroll if you wish. Of course, there are payment plans, pay in full. And if you have any questions about the program, please be in touch. All right, Venus retrograde. So we're just going to have a bit of a review this time. As I'm recording this, it's Friday afternoon, February 21. And over the course of the weekend, the next couple of days, Venus is going to hit that station degree, which is 10 degrees of Aries. And so that energy of the retrograde is most definitely going to be switched on. Now, the Venus retrograde cycle, in terms of its structure, is identical to Mercury. We have that regular rhythm and pace of Mercury retrogrades, and it's exactly the same with Venus. The only difference is that the Mercury retrograde phase is much shorter and much more regular. So we're got about a 4-month cycle with Mercury. With Venus, we're looking at about 1.5 years, but the structure is the same. Venus retrogrades in the same signs within a couple of degrees of each other every 8 years. So the retrograde that we're going through now, Aries Pisces, was the same as 8 years ago, bar a couple of degrees. And the next one in 2026, we're going, yes, we have another one next year, and that's going to be across Scorpio Libra. But the key factor in how it feels, what we experience with the Venus retrograde, is rather than those logical, logistical issues that we have with Mercury, Venus speaks to cycles of relating. So she's talking about matters of the heart and relationships, which can often be painful and fraught as much as they can be exciting, and all of those things in between. Now, as far as Venus, the planet's concerned, she's been an evening star now for quite a few months. She's been gorgeous. The seed point of the cycle that we have been unfolding through, so let's say the Kazimi, we'll either get a Venus Kazimi, the sun, So that is when she's making the superior conjunction in direct motion. And we'll also have another Venus Kazimi where it's the inferior conjunction or she's retrograde. So that's what we're closest to now. But if you cast your mind back to June of 2024, from memory, it was about June 5, we had Venus Kazimi at 14 degrees of Gemini. So that was where she was at the far side of the sun, and going through her transition into the evening star phase. So you might cast your mind back to early June. If you've got a planet or a point around 14 of Gemini, that might even help you figure out what this might mean. So that was the seeding point. Cast your mind back to then, and we've been on a journey of growth, the heart, through that time. And think about, if you don't even have any point, most of us won't, I do, at 14 Gemini, think about the house. What was going on for you June last year? And how has that been maybe expanding, growing, changing, evolving as Jupiter has been in Gemini as well? So when we think about Venus retrograde, especially, it's a journey of the heart into the underworld. So we have to kind of wrangle with a few monsters in the underworld. And these might be relational of nature, obviously speaking to the idea of Venus being a relational planet, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to others, or how we relate to the house topics that speak to Aries and Pisces as this Venus retrograde crosses that sign boundary. Oftentimes, I describe the journey of Venus when I'm teaching astrology is the journey of Sansa in Game of Thrones. So sorry if you've not watched the show. It feels like such a long time ago now, and I guess it was. But in short, Sansa was a fair young maiden from the north, and she got married into a family in the south. And it wasn't a very nice family, mind you. And the story of her character in the series basically was a journey into the underworld for her, fraught with what was, terrors of the night and all of the things, those Game of Thrones one-liners that we used to talk about a lot. But when she rose from the underworld, she started as a fair maiden, a young, naive girl, went into the underworld and came out a right royal queen. So it is very much the journey of Persephone that Sansa in the show went through in that series. So it is a journey of the heart, and it's painful. For some of us, this is going to mean we might have to let something or someone go. We might have to realize that the conscious connections that maybe we're trying to work towards aren't really quite that conscious. We might recognize some patterns in our life that are repeating, and we need to heal them. And what does healing really mean? Healing is a word that gets used so much. And I guess my personal theory on healing is we don't. Sorry to say that, but what we do is we bring light to what we're afraid of. We bring light to what we fear, and we face it. Because what keeps us locked in patterns, what keeps us locked in cycles, is either attracting the same issues, which can be a very Venus thing because she is an energy of attraction. So we attract patterns of relating, patterns of experiences, patterns of thinking, patterns of being. We get to that point, we're like, why is this happening all the time? Then we have to look at, what are we afraid of? And usually what we're afraid of is simply a feeling. It's not necessarily the outcome, it is the feeling of having to experience that outcome, or process that feeling. We're running from the feeling, not the situation, more often than not. So one way to think about this as well is that, as I mentioned before, the seeding point of, well, the last time Venus conjoined the sun, not necessarily, you could call it a seeding point if you wish, is back in June 14 Gemini. Now, what's really interesting here is just a little correlation I've noticed just looking at this. I'm going to share the chart now. When Venus makes her next Kazimi, her inferior conjunction with the sun, and that happens at 2 degrees of Aries. So this is the retrograde conjunction with the sun, where Venus technically is switching sides with the sun, and she's going to start her ascent out of the underworld and rise as a morning star. So that is to me, I see that as, Venus rising or Venus being seated. She's coming out of the darkness and into the light. Um, so she's coming out of that bottom point. She's empowered, she's infused by the sun, she's cleansed off any of the old habits, the old patterns, the old ways of being. And also bolstered by Mars just being retrograde. We might have had to face some stuff with the Mars retrograde, and now it's sort of okay, well, how do I redo these patterns, these habits, these attitudes, these ways of being? Especially when it comes to the heart and relational stuff. Now, the part that I found really interesting is that Jupiter is at 14 degrees at present. Well, when this Kazimi takes place, this conjunction with Venus and the Sun, and that's where the last Kazimi of Venus happened. So I do feel that there's a Jupiterian flavor to this. There might be an expansive quality. Maybe some of the fears or the feelings that we're avoiding is just because we're not willing to communicate them, we're not willing to explore them. But there is that sense of onwards and upwards wherever Jupiter is concerned. Also, keep in mind that Jupiter is in the middle of squares with Saturn. So there is this idea here that we can have maybe just adjustments are required. But how often do we not make these adjustments simply because we're not willing to have the conversation, or we're not willing to maybe explore other perspectives or get somebody else's point of view? Venus retrograde really asks us, how have we compromised on our happiness for the sake of something or someone else? How many times have you turned a blind eye to this, that, or something else because it just feels easier than having the conversation, communicating a desire, communicating an idea, a perspective, an opinion, whatever. Now, this happens at 2 degrees of Aries. So yes, Venus is a little bit debilitated, we could say, but she's also in Aries, she's less inclined to go along to get along. And as she switches signs with the sun and starts to make her way as a morning star, we are going to be ever so slowly moving towards more that independent morning star seated with Aries type of Venus. Now, I could go on a little bit of a tangent here. I'll try to avoid doing that. But for those who might be a little bit more clued into astrological cycles, do keep in mind that this seeding point is going to be the area that Saturn and Neptune are going to get really close to in the upcoming months. Of course, they don't get to 2 degrees as such, they only get to one. But there is a little bit of an idea here that whatever happens with this retrograde, we're going to need to commit to it. We might need to commit to a dream, the ideal, the hope. Even if at the present moment it seems too hard, it might be easier to just, quit or stop or what have you. Of course, it's definitely going to depend on your chart, your configurations, and what's going on for you in the broader picture. As I said, it is a cycle of really getting in touch with what you desire and what you really want, and balancing the ideas of chasing, which is what Aries will do, but attracting with what Venus essentially does. And there's a lot of ideas out there I'm seeing on social media about masculine and feminine and all of this sort of stuff. So this might be an area in your life where you're having to sort of wrangle with that polarity or wrangle with those energies. And I don't know about you, but for this binary world that people, non-binary world, I should say, that people want to be in, when it comes to these definitions, people want to really make it very binary. So it might be about you finding your philosophy, Jupiter and Gemini, reactivating that point that, yes, we do all have these polarities within us. And it's just about balancing them out in the right way that would make for happier relationships. So I hope that's helped you just to sort of plant some seeds and think about the more productive, or maybe not productive, but maybe more broader perspective of what Venus retrograde can symbolize for us, as opposed to just being another retrograde planet and everything's ruined. There's always a method in the astrological madness, and our job, I feel, is to honor that, recognize that, and work with that energy so we can then make the most of it, and use it in a more conscious way, to have a happier life. So that's it for today. The next video, I'm going to take Aries retrograde, Venus retrograde through the houses for you, because we are working with crossovers. And so that's a little bit of a tricky point as well, where Venus goes from her sign of detriment to her sign of exaltation. So that's really interesting dynamic as well. We'll explore that in the next video. So if you would like to dive more deeply into what this cycle might mean for you, your chart, relationships, or whatever your Aries Pisces house is, of course, readings are available. I do readings a lot, all of the time. So do feel free to reach out if you do wish to book one in. And the links to do that via my website are in the show notes below. So, it's a lot of astrology right now. I realize that. It's definitely many, many years ago, I got a fortune cookie that said, the sooner you fall behind, the longer you have to catch up. And that's very much the energy of what we are in now with retrograde city. So it is what it is, and there's nothing really we can do about it but work with it in the best way possible. So I hope this video has helped you maybe feel a little bit more inspired by these retrogrades, as opposed to feeling like your life is gone to the dogs because of it. So until next time, everyone, I hope you have a really great weekend, a really great Mars direct station, and brace yourself for Venus next. All right, until next time, have a good one.